All right, well, hey gang. New agents are always asking me what to ask in the home, and we do have a couple of questionnaire type things on the Dropbox, but I just wanted to kind of show you how I do it myself in the home because that's always a big question. And so if this is the lead, I'm just going to take the back of the lead and I'm going to take some notes on it. I'm going to start by putting down the amount of the mortgage. So let's say that the mortgage is $188,000. We're going to see if it's a 30-year. If it's a 30-year, I'm going to put a 30-year on there. And then I'm going to ask them what's the mortgage payment that they make each month. And all right, let's say it's $1,400 a month. Maybe it's kind of high for a 30-year, but we'll say it's that. Sometimes when I'm chit-chatting, I say, oh, well, how long has this been a refinance? Or how long have you been in the home? Oh, my goodness, you've been in the home for 20 years? I'm just going to stick that information over here in the corner. If they've been in the home for 20 years, and maybe that it's, just put on here that it's a refi. So we've got all the mortgage information up here. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to put the husband's name down here, and I'm going to put the wife's name over here. And I've got like kind of a column so that when I give price choices, I can kind of differentiate. But here's Dan's options, here's Mary's options. But I got Dan, he's age 51, and he's a non-smoker. Okay, I keep that stuff right there. Mary, she's 52, also a non-smoker. Sometimes I'll put the date of birth up here. But the next line of questioning that I have, and sometimes as I'm chit-chatting, and sometimes this type of information will come out in the conversation, but, I might say, well, how long have you guys been married? Oh my gosh, they've been married for 25 years. I just put that over there. And then they got 3 kids and 6 grandkids. Okay, so I kind of put their kids. If they had kids in the home, I'd kind of list their names and ages here, right down the middle here. Okay, because more than likely we're going to be talking about these guys later as a beneficiary or a contingent beneficiary. But then I'm going to go straight to employment information. I'm going to say, Dan, okay, where do you work at? Okay, you work at, let's see, Conway Freight. He's a truck driver. How long you been there, Dan? Oh my gosh, you've been doing that for 18 years. Cool. Okay, what's your monthly income? Okay, so my $4,500 a month gross. And you contribute to a 401k, Dan, or how do you save for retirement over there? Do they have 401k for you? So I'm going to get his 401k information, and if they match it, I'm going to say, we'll say Dan puts away 3% because that's what they match. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same for Mary. Okay, Mary, are you currently working out of the home? Okay, Mary's working part-time at Walgreens. And she's doing part-time, and she's bringing in about $1,600 a month. And are you saving anything for retirement, Mary? No, not right now. Okay. Anything from a previous job, Mary? Anything, 401k from a previous job? Okay, and if she did have one, I would just put a little note on here and say 401k, previous job, and we're going to get back to that, okay? But that's just so I know what that is. Now, I don't want to bombard them with all of the financial questions all at once because we just did financial stuff up here. We did financial stuff right here. So now I'm going to go to their health questions. I'm going to kind of switch it up a little bit, and I'm going to say, Dan, what kind of prescription medication does the doctor have you taking? Okay, so you're taking something for blood pressure, and you've got 2 meds, and I'm going to put them down. He's taking lisinopril, HCTZ, and then he's taking, amlodipine. Okay, that's probably the same thing, but I'm just putting that's what he takes. A couple of questions that I'm going to ask on that. Dan, how long have you been being treated for blood pressure? Okay, these are just basic underwriting questions that you always want to ask. How long have you had this condition, or how long have you been on blood pressure medication? Okay, in his case, we'll say it's 5 years. And it's been under control all that time with these 2 medications. No further health issues, no heart issues, no hospitalizations. Okay, so I'm going to dig into that right there. If he's got diabetes, I'm going to ask him, what are you taking? He's taking metformin. How long have you been on that metformin? Okay, 2 years. Everything under control? Any insulin use? No? Okay. So I'm going to ask the condition. I'm going to ask how long they've had the condition. I'm going to get the name of their doctor. Dr. Sanderson. Okay, how often do you see him? Every 3 months. And when's the last time you saw him? Okay, last seen June 15th, 2015. Okay, and usually I'll get the city and state of the doctor. So put city and state. And that way I can look up the doctor's information later. If they have it right there, that's great. But I don't want to bog them down too much with that information because I can Google that in like 2 seconds. So I can later on in the application, I'm going to get Dr. Sanderson's address and phone number. I'm going to put they see him every 3 months, and the date last seen was June 15th. Okay? So same with Mary. We're going to make this go quick. So we're going to do no meds on her. She's pretty healthy. There we go. So now I've got all their health information, and now that I have their health information, now in my mind, I kind of know what they're going to qualify for, okay? I know for a fact that they're both going to qualify for term coverage. And so I'm going to say, hey, Dan, Mary, normally, you know, there's 2 different types of life insurance. There's term life and there's whole life. Those are the 2 main types of life insurance that are out there. And term life, the way I remember term life is that it terminates, okay? It only goes for 10 or 15 or 20, 30 years, and then it's gone. It terminates, okay? So it's just for a period of time. Whole life, the way I remember whole life is it lasts the whole rest of your life, okay? And it's permanent, okay? So the benefits of term coverage is you can get more coverage for your money, but it goes away. Whole life, it's permanent. So the benefit is it doesn't go away, but usually people just get less of it because of that, okay? So normally, Dan and Mary, normally what we recommend for mortgage protection is term coverage, okay? Because with term coverage, you've only got this mortgage here for 30 years. Do you have plans on paying this mortgage off early? You know, and I'll kind of bring that up into the equation. Are you going to pay this off early? A lot of folks will tell me that they're going to have it paid off in 20 years. You know, they're making an extra payment each month or something like that. And so I'm going to say, okay, well, that's great. So we actually really only need the coverage for a short period of time, So term coverage would be the most appropriate for you since you're using this coverage to protect the mortgage, to protect the home. Okay, so normally we are looking at term coverage. Now that you know the different types of coverage, Dan and Mary, how can you best see me being able to help you today? Okay, and that was the power question. So I hope you caught that. I say, now that you know the different types of coverage that are available to you, how can you see me being able to help you best today? And then Dan's going to say something along the lines of, well, actually, we just need to make sure that I've got some extra coverage on me because if something happens to me, then Mary's not going to be able to keep the house. Okay, so then I'm going to repeat that back to him, and I'm going to say, okay, Dan, so what you're telling me is that if you could only cover one of you today, it'd be more important to get the coverage on you because Mary would be at more financial risk if something happened to you. Is that correct? You'd say, yeah. And then I'd say, okay, well, before I make any recommendations, I always like to get a full picture of what we're dealing with. And I don't like to recommend anything that you're already currently paying for. So what kind of life insurance do you already have put in place? And let's get that down, okay? So what kind of coverage do you have? Dan, do you have any coverage? Well, first of all, do you have any coverage on the job? Oh yeah, they give me, you know, $150,000 on the job. So I'll say $150,000 on the job. Anything outside of the job, Dan? Anything that you actually own yourself? No coverage. Okay. Okay, so they give you some with the group rate. Now, Dan, we don't really count that stuff because that's coverage on your job. You actually don't own that coverage. It's a benefit. You might pay a little bit for it, but the employer pays it. And if you did leave or retire, you typically don't get to keep that coverage. And if they fight me back and they say, oh yeah, I get to keep the coverage, I say, yeah, well, usually when they do offer it that way, it's usually way too expensive. So it's always advantageous for you to have your own coverage, Dan, that you own, and that you get locked in at your own at the rate today, and the prices never goes up. Okay, so we're gonna look at that. Mary, do you have any coverage on you? Okay. Oh, you guys have a $50,000 policy on Mary. Okay, is that term or whole life? Okay, that's permanent coverage, and who's that with? Okay, that's with Liberty. Okay, so you got $50,000 in whole life with Liberty. What do you pay each month on that? Okay, pay $43 a month. All right, very good. That sounds like a great policy. I always pat them on the back for having coverage. So, and if Dan had coverage too, I'd take that into consideration. And if he did have $100,000, say Dan has $100,000. I'm going to say, okay, Dan, how long have you had that coverage? Okay, 9 years. And when does it expire? And this is usually where they go blank and they don't really know. So I'm going to say, hey, you know what? While I'm here, why don't you just pull that coverage out really quick? Let's pull that policy out. We'll take a quick look at it and we'll see if it's, you know, due to expire anytime soon, or if it's good to go. And so hopefully they're going to pull that coverage out and we're going to take a look at that coverage and see what needs to be done. And a lot of times, you know, if he's had it for 9 years, it might be a 20-year term. He might have another 11 years. So I might take that into consideration. I do know that the budget is tight, okay, because Mary's, I don't know. I'm just going to say that I'm thinking that they're working with a budget, okay? And if he's paying, let's say he's paying $36 a month for this coverage, I'm going to take that into consideration. So I'm not going to I never really make any recommendations to replace the coverage unless it's just a really horrible policy. But I'm usually going to congratulate them on having coverage and affirm them, and we're going to work with what they have. So Dan, for example, I'm going to look at some term coverage, and at his age of 51, I will let him know up front. I say, you know, at your age of 51, it does start to get a little bit more expensive, so I'm glad you have this $100,000 in coverage because we might only need another $100,000 or so. So let's take a look at that. And how much coverage do you want me to put in for, Dan? And I've got my computer open, and I'm going to let him tell me how much coverage he wants me to look for, okay? And truthfully, a lot of times he's going to say he doesn't know, okay? So if he hems and haws, sometimes he's going to say, well, put in the whole thing. Sometimes he'll say that, or sometimes he'll say, well, I don't know. And then I'm going to say this. I'm going to say, hey, Dan, let's just see what $100,000 is, okay? Let's see what $100,000 is, because that's actually the most popular coverage amount that most people go for. And that'll give us a good baseline, Dan, and we can go up or down for there, okay? And he'll be like, yeah, okay. So $100,000, we're going to look at a 20-year term. And at Dan's age, I don't know, guys, let's say it's $64. I'm just totally pulling this out of thin air. But, so I'm going to say, okay, all right, Dan, $100,000, a 20-year term, it locks in at $64 a month. How does that feel to you? Does that feel like doable, or does that feel on the high end? We want to look at a different coverage amount. You want to look at more or less. And he's going to tell me. He wants, let's look at some more coverage, or let's look at less coverage, because Dan is in control of his own budget, okay? I'm just here to help make recommendations. And so we're going to put down, and sometimes if Dan is more of a slower processor, we're going to put down 3 different options. Sometimes we do this, and sometimes we don't even have to. Sometimes they like the 100,000, or they say, "Oh, what's 150?" And then I'm going to put 150 down. But we're gonna do this until Dan finds one that he likes, and he's going to tell me. He's going to say, "Oh, you know what? I like that one." And I'm going to say, "Okay, 75,000. All right, that's the one we're going to apply for." Okay, all right. Well, I just actually need your photo ID for the application, Dan. And then he gives me his driver's license, and we fill out the application. So I hope you all notice I am using a black gel pen. If you are using paper applications, please use a black gel pen. Those are the best. And that's about it. So we do the same thing for Mary if she wanted coverage. Usually I'm going to give them 3 options, and we're going to go based on their budget. And then we might add these together to see what might fit into their budget and all of that kind of stuff. But that's kind of how I set it up, and that way I can just kind of all do it right there in the back of this lead sheet. Where I'm doing financial information, and I'm kind of capturing some of these little extras, like how long they've been married, you know, if they've got a 401k. So when I go to deliver Dan's policy, when I sit down to deliver that with them, I'm going to say, hey, okay, let's talk about that 401k that Mary's got sitting there, and I'm going to make another sale out of it. So, all right, guys, I hope that helps. You can kind of see I go financial, health, financial, do a little teaching in there. Really let the client feel like they're in control of their own coverage, and go out there and help some families.